My father said I was a disgrace, so I showed up to dinner with a surprise in my hand. Emily Johnson felt her hands tremble as she held the gift box wrapped in gold paper with a vibrant red bow. Her decision to appear at her father's birthday dinner had been made just 2 hours earlier, after an entire week of his words echoing in her mind like a sentence. It was the previous week that Richard Johnson, a respected businessman from New York City, had told his daughter she was a disgrace to the family for dropping out of medical school in her 5th year to work as an elderly caregiver. The words still stung like an open wound. The door to the restaurant's private dining room opened, and Emily entered slowly. All conversations ceased. Aunts, uncles, cousins, and extended family members stopped eating and stared at her with a mix of surprise and discomfort. Silence hung over the elegantly set table, where 23 people were celebrating Richard's 65th birthday. "Emily?" Her mother, Patricia's voice sounded hesitant. "Sweetheart, what are you doing here?" Richard, seated at the head of the table, didn't hide his irritation. His brown eyes, which once shone with pride when he spoke of his future daughter, now showed only disappointment. "I didn't invite her," he said coldly, cutting a piece of salmon without looking at her. "I know, Dad," Emily replied, her voice steadier than she expected. "But I needed to be here today." She walked along the side of the table, past the curious glances of her relatives. Her older brother, Michael, a renowned cardiologist, watched her with a mix of pity and disapproval. His wife, Jessica, whispered something to cousin Ashley, who quickly turned to get a better look at the scene. "Emily, dear," said Aunt Margaret, always the family diplomat. "What a lovely surprise to see you. Are you okay?" "I am, Aunt. Thank you." Emily stopped beside the chair where a silver-haired woman with a distant gaze sat. Mrs. Margaret, her 82-year-old grandmother, stared at her plate without recognizing where she was or who the people around her were. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. "Grandma." Emily knelt beside the chair and gently touched the elderly woman's wrinkled hand. "It's me, Emily, your granddaughter." Mrs. Margaret slowly lifted her eyes, but there was no recognition in them. Only the haze that Alzheimer's had brought over the last 3 years, gradually stealing away the strong, joyful woman who had practically raised Richard on her own. "Who are you, young lady?" the elderly woman asked in a fragile voice. Emily's heart broke once more, but she smiled. "Someone who loves you very much, Grandma." Richard slammed his fork onto his plate, startling everyone. "Emily, stop this performance. If you came here to embarrass me on my birthday, you can leave right now." "Richard," Patricia touched her husband's arm. "She's our daughter." He replied sharply. "She was our daughter when she had a future ahead of her. Now she's just a confused young woman who threw away 6 years of college to wipe drool off old people." A murmur of discomfort spread across the table. Emily felt her cheeks burn, but she didn't move from her grandmother's side. "I brought a gift," she said, lifting the golden box. "It's not for you, it's for her." Richard laughed bitterly. "A gift for my mother? She doesn't even know who you are, Emily. This act is ridiculous." "Richard, please," Patricia pleaded softly. Emily ignored her father and focused on her grandmother. She carefully placed the box on her lap. "Grandma, there's a surprise here for you. Would you like to open it?" Mrs. Margaret looked at the box as if it were some alien object. Her hands trembled until they found the red ribbon. Slowly, she began to untie the bow. "This is a waste of time," Michael grumbled. "Mum won't understand what it is." "Let her try," Emily replied without taking her eyes off her grandmother. The golden wrapping paper was peeled away little by little, revealing an ordinary shoebox. Mrs. Margaret opened it and found inside a brown leather-bound photo album. "What is this?" Patricia asked, leaning in for a better look. Emily helped her grandmother open the album to the first page. The black and white photograph showed a beautiful, radiant 20-year-old woman standing beside a tall, dark-haired young man in a military uniform. "My God," Richard whispered, dropping his fork. "Where did you get this?" Mrs. Margaret's reaction was immediate, her eyes fixed on the photograph, and a subtle transformation began to take place on her face. The fog seemed to lift for a few moments. "George?" she murmured, touching the photo with her fingertips. My George. Patricia brought her hands to her chest, moved. Richard stood up from his chair, stunned. How is she recognizing him? Emily turned to the next page. Another photograph showed the same couple, now at their wedding. She in a simple white dress, he in a dark suit. Our wedding day, Mrs. Margaret whispered, and a tear rolled down her cheek. He looked so handsome that day. Michael stepped closer, his doctor's skepticism evident. This is impossible. Her Alzheimer's is advanced. She hasn't recognized anyone in over a year. She does now, Emily said softly. She just needed the right key to unlock those memories. She continued turning the pages. More old photographs, all digitally restored and printed on high-quality photo paper. The young couple holding a baby. Richard as a child playing in the backyard, Mrs. Margaret cooking in the kitchen of their old house. Where did these photos come from? Richard asked, his voice choked. I thought they were all lost in the fire at the house on Madison Avenue. They weren't lost, Emily replied. Grandma had kept the negatives in a metal box in the attic. I found them when I was helping her pack before she moved to the nursing home. You went to Mom's house? Patricia asked, surprised. Several times. Someone needed to sort through her things with care, not just box everything up like you all did. Richard felt a pang of guilt, but tried to stay composed. We had no choice. She couldn't live alone anymore, and none of us had time to take proper care of her. I did, Emily countered. I offered to live with her, remember? But you all said I was crazy and needed to focus on my studies. Mrs. Margaret kept flipping through the album, each page bringing a new spark of recognition. In one photo, she appeared pregnant, standing beside George in the garden of their home. I was waiting for you, Richard, she said suddenly, looking at her son. You took so long to be born. Your father was so nervous pacing back and forth at the hospital. Richard froze. That specific detail, something only his mother could know, left him speechless. Mom, he approached slowly. Do you know who I am? Mrs. Margaret lifted her eyes from the album and looked at him. For a moment, the confusion returned. But then, slowly, a smile formed on her lips. My boy, she reached out to him. My Richard, you've grown so much. Tears began to stream down the businessman's face. He took his mother's hand and kissed it. I've missed you, Mom. I've missed you so much. The whole table fell silent, watching this impossible moment. Michael shook his head, still trying to make sense of it from a medical standpoint. How did you do this? Patricia asked her daughter, amazed. How did you manage to bring her back? Emily Johnson wiped her own tears before answering. I didn't bring her back. She never left. She was just lost and needed a map to find her way. What kind of map? Michael asked skeptically. Emotional memories, positive emotional triggers, things that made sense in her life. For the last 6 months, I've been working with Grandma using photographs, music from her time, familiar objects, recipes she used to cook. Richard let go of his mother's hand and turned to Emily. You've been visiting her at the nursing home? Why didn't you tell me? Because you made it very clear you didn't approve of my decision to work with the elderly. I thought you'd be even angrier if you knew I was spending my time on what you called old people's babysitting. The word babysitting hung over the table like a slap. Richard lowered his gaze, ashamed. I didn't mean... Yes, you did, Dad. And it's okay. I understand your disappointment. But I needed you to see this. Emily turned a few more pages of the album. The photos showed moments of family life, birthdays, Christmases, graduations. In one of them, Richard stood receiving his business degree, his parents beside him, beaming with pride. I remember that day, Mrs. Margaret said softly. You were so nervous to walk across the stage, but you looked so handsome in your cap and gown. Richard choked back a sob. Michael leaned in, intrigued by his mother's clarity. Mom, do you remember his name? The doctor tested. Richard William Johnson, she answered without hesitation. Born on April 15th, 1958 at 6:40 in the morning. He weighed 7 pounds. Michael's jaw dropped. Those details were correct down to the minute. What about me? He asked. Do you remember me? Mrs. Margaret studied him for a moment, concentrating. Michael Joseph, my second boy. You came 2 years later, but it was easier. You arrived fast, almost in the taxi. My God, Michael whispered. This is medically impossible. The level of deterioration she showed. Medicine doesn't know everything, Doctor, Emily said with a sad smile. Sometimes the heart remembers what the mind forgets. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now, back to the story. Richard sank heavily into the chair beside his mother, still processing what was happening. Why didn't you tell me what you were doing? He asked his daughter. Why keep it a secret? Because I was afraid, Emily admitted. Afraid you'd forbid me from seeing Grandma. Afraid you'd think I was giving all of us false hope. Her cousin Ashley, who had stayed quiet until then, decided to interject. Sorry, Emily, but don't you think you might be fooling everyone? I mean, Alzheimer's has no cure. This could just be a lucky moment. Emily took a deep breath before answering. You're right, Ashley. Alzheimer's has no cure. But that doesn't mean we should give up on the people we love. It means we have to fight differently. But you dropped out of medical school, Ashley pressed. Imagine how many people you could have helped if you'd become a doctor. I am helping people, Emily countered, just not the way you expected. Richard watched the exchange, growing more uncomfortable. His mother's clarity was making him question many of his certainties. Emily, he said slowly, do you really believe you can make a difference working with the elderly? Isn't it just caring for people who will... He trailed off, unable to say the word. Who will pass? Emily finished. That's exactly why it matters, Dad, because we all will someday. The question is how we live the time we have. Mrs. Margaret closed the album and hugged it to her chest. Thank you, my dear, she said to Emily. Thank you for bringing my George back to me. It had been so long since I could see his face. He never left your heart, Grandma. You just needed a photograph to remember. Patricia, who had been silently crying, finally spoke. Emily, sweetheart, I need to tell you something. I knew about your visits to the nursing home. Everyone turned to her, surprised. What do you mean, Patricia? Richard asked. The head sister called me a few months ago, mentioning a young woman who visited Mrs. Margaret every day. She described the girl and I knew it was our daughter. But I didn't tell you because I thought you'd be even angrier. Richard felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. His own wife had hidden information about their daughter to protect her from his anger. You two teamed up against me? It wasn't against you, Richard, Patricia said softly. It was to protect love. The love our daughter has for her grandmother. Love you couldn't see. Emily seized the moment of silence to pull out her phone. Can I show you something? Without waiting for an answer, she tapped the screen and a video began to play. In the footage, Mrs. Margaret stood in a small kitchen wearing a floral apron, stirring something in a pot. What is this? Michael asked. Grandma cooking yesterday, Emily replied. She remembered the cornbread cake recipe she used to make for you when you were kids. In the video, Mrs. Margaret hummed an old tune as she cooked. Her movements were confident, natural, as if she'd never forgotten how. This was yesterday? Richard asked, disbelieving. Yes, and look at this. Emily swiped to another video. This time, Mrs. Margaret sat at an old piano playing a soft, melancholic melody. She's playing piano, Patricia murmured. But it's been over 10 years since she last played. 17, Richard corrected automatically. She stopped when Dad died. In the video, Mrs. Margaret played with her eyes closed, completely immersed in the music. Her fragile voice could be heard humming along. What song is that? Michael asked. One she composed for Grandpa when they were young, Emily explained. She told me the story, said she used to play it for him every night before bed. Richard closed his eyes, transported to childhood memories. He vaguely recalled waking some nights to the sound of his mother's piano echoing through the house, always those same delicate, loving notes. How did you find out about the song? He asked. She told me in one of her clear moments. It happens more than you think. We just have to be there to notice. Aunt Margaret, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. "Emily, dear, this is incredible. You really brought Margaret back to us." "I didn't bring anyone back, Aunt. She was always here. She was just speaking a language we didn't understand." Richard took his daughter's phone and watched the videos again. With every second, his certainty about Emily's choices crumbled further. "Where did you learn to do this?" he asked. "These techniques, are they taught somewhere?" "Yes. I'm taking a specialization course in gerontology and alternative therapies for the elderly. It's offered by Columbia University, in partnership with specialized care institutions." Michael straightened in his chair. "Columbia? Is this recognized by the medical board?" "It's not traditional medicine, Michael. It's a multidisciplinary approach that involves psychology, occupational therapy, music therapy, cognitive stimulation, and humanized care." "So you didn't give up on your studies," Patricia said, surprised. "You just changed direction." "Exactly, Mom. I didn't give up on helping people. I just found a different way to do it." Richard was conflicted. Part of him wanted to be proud of his daughter, but another part still resisted the idea that she had made the right choice. "But Emily," he said slowly, "you could make so much more money as a doctor, have a different social status, recognition." "And what's the point of having all that if I'm not happy doing what I do?" she replied. "Dad, are you happy being a businessman?" The question caught Richard off guard. He opened his mouth to say yes, but the words wouldn't come. I have responsibilities, a family to support, commitments." "That doesn't answer my question. Are you happy?" The silence that followed was deafening. Richard looked at his wife, his children, his mother holding the photo album like it was a treasure. "Happiness is a luxury," he finally said. "When you have responsibilities, you do what needs to be done, not what you want to do." "What if I told you it's possible to do both?" Emily asked. "To be responsible and happy at the same time?" Before he could answer, Mrs. Margaret lifted her head from the album and looked straight at her son. "Richard, my dear, you're sad." He turned to her, surprised by the observation. "I'm not sad, Mom. I'm fine." "No, you're not. I can see it in your eyes. The same look you had when you were little and couldn't do something. You've always been so hard on yourself." The accuracy of her words shook Richard. How could his mother, even with Alzheimer's, read his feelings better than he could? "Mom, do you remember when you wanted to be a teacher?" Mrs. Margaret continued. "You used to play pretend, giving lessons to your toys. You said you were going to teach all the children in the world how to read." Richard paled. That memory was buried so deep even he had forgotten it. I don't remember that." "I do," she said tenderly. "Your father said teachers didn't make enough money, that you had to think of something more practical. You cried so much that day." Patricia looked at her husband, stunned. In 28 years of marriage, he had never mentioned wanting to be a teacher. "Richard, is that true?" she asked softly. He couldn't answer. His mother's words had reopened a wound he thought had healed decades ago. Emily watched her father with a mix of pity and understanding. Suddenly, so many things made sense. "That's why you were so upset when I changed majors," she said slowly. "It wasn't just about medicine. It was about choosing to follow my heart instead of my head." Richard finally looked up at his daughter. "Do you have any idea how many people I could have helped if I'd followed my dream?" His voice was thick with emotion. "How many children could have learned to love books? And do you have any idea how many people I can help by following mine?" Emily replied gently. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. The businessman took a deep breath, trying to compose himself, but the emotion was overwhelming him in a way it hadn't in years. "Emily, I'm scared," he finally admitted. "Scared that you'll regret it. Scared that one day you'll realize you could have done more." "What if I told you I'm already doing more than I ever imagined possible?" She picked up her phone again and showed him a folder filled with dozens of videos. "Want to see what else I've managed to do these past few months?" Without waiting for an answer, she tapped on another video. This time it showed a room full of elderly people participating in group activities. Some were painting, others singing, some just chatting animatedly. "What is this place?" Michael asked. "It's the program I developed at Grandma's nursing home. I got permission to implement group therapy activities. Look at the results." The video showed faces that had once been apathetic and confused, now smiling and engaged. An elderly woman laughed loudly as she tried to paint. An old man with a cane danced slowly to an old song. They're happy," Patricia observed, impressed. "They are, and their families too. Look at this." Emily tapped on another video. A middle-aged woman spoke to the camera, clearly emotional. "I hadn't seen my father smile in 2 years. I thought I'd lost him forever. But after he started joining Emily's activities, he became himself again. Yesterday, he called to tell me he'd painted a picture. My father, who hadn't held a paintbrush in decades, painted a picture and was as proud as a child." Richard watched the testimony in silence. Then came another, and another. Each family sharing how Emily's program had transformed their loved ones' lives. "How many people are you helping?" he asked. At Grandma's nursing home, 42 seniors regularly participate, but the program is expanding to other facilities. So far, we've reached over 150 people. Michael shook his head, still processing. "Emily, this is incredible. But how are you funding all this? Art supplies, musical instruments, equipment?" "With my own money," she replied simply. "The savings I set aside during college, the money you gave me for books and materials, I invested everything in the project." "Your savings?" Richard asked. "Emily, how much money have you spent?" $15,000 so far." The businessman paled. $15,000? Sweetheart, that's a financial loss. You threw money away." "I didn't throw it away, Dad. I invested in the most important thing there is, human dignity." The words hung over the table like thunder. Richard tried to argue, but the words wouldn't come. That's when Ashley decided to chime in again. "Sorry, Emily, but isn't this all a little convenient?" she said with a venomous tone. "I mean, your grandmother is rich, right? Everyone knows she has properties and investments. Isn't it easier to take care of her to secure a piece of the inheritance?" The comment dropped like a bomb on the table. Patricia gasped, outraged. Michael clenched his fists. Richard stood up from his chair as if he'd been slapped. "Ashley, how dare you?" Patricia said, furious. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking," Ashley shot back, emboldened by some cousin's murmurs. "This sudden devotion to Grandma Margaret is awfully convenient." Emily felt her blood boil, but before she could respond, a frail yet firm voice cut through the air. "She's the only one who truly cares about me." Everyone turned to Mrs. Margaret, who had spoken with striking clarity. "Grandma?" Emily asked softly. "This girl," Mrs. Margaret pointed at Emily, "is the only person who visits me every day. The only one who talks to me like I'm still a person. The only one who doesn't pity me." She turned to Ashley with a look that held no senility. "And you, young lady, who are you again? Because I don't recall you ever visiting the nursing home." Ashley turned red, speechless. I live far away, Grandma." "Far away?" Mrs. Margaret repeated. "You live 20 minutes from here. I know because I heard your mother mention it. You don't come to see me because you're disgusted by old people." The awkward silence spread across the table. Ashley tried to defend herself, but was interrupted by Richard. "Enough, Ashley. You've gone too far." He turned to Emily, his face marked by guilt. "Sweetheart, I'm sorry for your cousin's insinuation and for everything I said about your choices." "Dad, no, let me finish. I was wrong, completely wrong. You didn't abandon anything. You found your calling." Tears began rolling down Richard's face. "You did in 6 months what I couldn't do in 3 years. You brought my mother back to me. You made me remember who I was before I lost myself in what I thought I should be." He paused, searching for the right words. "You know what the truth is? I wasn't angry at you for dropping out of medical school. I was jealous. Jealous of your courage to follow your heart, something I never had." Patricia held her husband's hand, moved by his confession. "Richard, Patricia, I spent 40 years of my life doing what others expected of me, I built a successful business, made money, gained social status. But do you know what I feel when I wake up every morning? Empty. He looked at Emily with admiration. And you, at 24, have already discovered something I'm still searching for. Purpose. Emily moved closer to her father and hugged him. For the first time in months, the two truly connected. Dad. It's never too late to start over, she whispered in his ear. You can start teaching whenever you want. Richard laughed through his tears. Teaching, sweetheart, I'm 65. Who would want a teacher that old? Life teaches at any age, Mrs. Margaret said softly. And experience is the best diploma there is. Michael, who had observed the entire scene in silence, finally spoke up. Emily, I need to admit something. As a doctor, I was skeptical about your methods. I thought they were pseudoscience, quackery. He paused, clearly embarrassed. But what I saw here today made me question everything I've learned about dementia treatment. Maybe traditional medicine doesn't have all the answers. Medicine saves lives, Michael, Emily replied. What I do just tries to make those lives more meaningful while they last. Can I learn more about your methods? He asked hesitantly. Maybe we could collaborate somehow. Really? Emily smiled. You'd do that? I would. In fact, I know some colleagues in geriatrics who'd be interested in your work. Richard watched the conversation between his children with a new feeling in his chest. For the first time in years, he felt genuine pride in the family he'd built. Emily, he said, I need to ask you an important question. Go ahead, Dad. How much money do you need to expand your project? She looked at him in surprise. What do you mean? Your program is working. It's helping people. It has the potential to help many more. What would it cost to implement it in more places? Emily swallowed hard. Dad, I can't take your money. Not after everything that's happened. It's not charity, sweetheart. It's an investment. An investment in something that truly matters. He turned to the whole table. In fact, I want to make a proposal to the whole family. How about we turn the next birthday into a charity event to raise funds for Emily's project? Patricia clapped, moved. Richard, what a wonderful idea. I'm in, Michael said immediately, and I can bring some doctor colleagues who would definitely contribute. And I can use my social connections, Aunt Margaret added. I know several people who'd be interested in supporting a cause like this. Emily was speechless, unable to believe what she was hearing. You'd really do that? Sweetheart, Richard said affectionately. When a family member finds their true calling, the whole family should support them. It took me a while to understand that, but now I do. Mrs. Margaret, who had been silently following the conversation, raised a trembling hand. May I say something? Everyone turned to her. I have some savings put aside. Not much, but something. I want it to be used for Emily's project. Grandma, you don't have to. Yes, I do, the elderly woman insisted. For 82 years, I lived for myself. Now I want to live for others too. Richard knelt beside his mother's chair. Mom, are you sure? I am, my son. And do you know why? Because this young woman taught me something very important today. What was it, Grandma? Emily asked. That even when we lose our memory, we don't lose the ability to love. And love is the only thing that truly matters. The elderly woman's words touched everyone at the table in different ways. Ashley, ashamed, quietly apologized. The cousins who had murmured against Emily now looked at her with respect. The uncles whispered among themselves about how they could contribute. Emily, Patricia said, sweetheart, you've created something beautiful, something that goes beyond caring for the elderly. You've created a new way of seeing aging. It's true, Richard agreed, and I want to be part of it. I want to help you turn this vision into reality for so many more people. Emily felt overwhelming emotion wash over her. After months of misunderstanding and judgment, her family was finally seeing the value of her work. There's something I haven't told you, she said slowly. What is it? Richard asked. I received an offer this week. A private institution wants to hire my services to develop a pilot program for compassionate elderly care. Really? Michael asked excitedly. Really? They saw the results of my work at Grandma's nursing home and were interested. The salary would be 3 times what I'd make as a newly graduated doctor. Richard was stunned. 3 times more? Emily, it's proof that there's a market for what I do, that I can be financially successful while doing what I love. She looked around the table. But the most important thing isn't the money. It's knowing I've found my life's purpose, and that you're all willing to support me. Patricia stood and hugged her daughter. Sweetheart, I'm sorry I didn't support you from the beginning, for letting fear of others' judgment influence me. Mum, you did support me, in your own way. Not the way you deserved. Richard also stood and joined the embrace. Emily, you taught me something very important today. You taught me that success isn't about what others think of our choices. It's about the positive impact we make on other people's lives. The family was gathered in a hug when Mrs. Margaret made a comment that made them laugh through their tears. Can someone explain why everyone's crying? I thought this was a birthday party. It is a party, Grandma, Emily said, wiping her tears. It's the celebration of a new beginning. The elderly woman smiled. Then how about some music? I've always loved parties with music. Richard glanced around the restaurant. There was a piano in the corner of the room. Mom, would you like to play something? Mrs. Margaret thought for a moment. Hey, it's been a long time since I've played in public. That's okay, Emily said. Play just for us, for your family. The elderly woman smiled and with Richard and Michael's help rose from her chair. They walked slowly to the piano and she carefully sat on the bench. Her hands trembled over the keys for a few moments. Then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, she began to play the same melody from the video Emily had shown them. The entire room stopped to listen. Restaurant staff discreetly approached. Other customers turned toward the music. The melody was simple but filled with emotion, and then Mrs. Margaret began to sing. Her voice, though fragile, carried decades of love and longing. When I look at you, my love, I see the time that has passed. I see the dreams we once dreamed, and the future we built together. Richard recognized the lyrics. It was the song his mother used to sing to his father every night. The song that had lulled him to sleep as a child, one he had completely forgotten. Time passes, the body grows weary, but love remains the same in the heart's memory. You are always immortal. When she finished, silence filled the room for a few seconds. Then, spontaneously, the entire restaurant burst into applause. Mrs. Margaret smiled, flustered by the attention but clearly happy. Was it nice? She asked Emily. It was perfect, Grandma. Absolutely perfect. The family returned to the table in a celebratory mood. The earlier tension had given way to a sense of togetherness they hadn't felt in years. Emily, Richard said as they sat down, I want to make you an official proposal. What kind of proposal? I want you to be my partner in a new venture, a company focused on innovative solutions for elderly care. Emily was speechless. Dad, are you serious? Completely serious. You have the technical expertise and the passion. I have the business experience and the capital. Together, we can turn your project into something much bigger. Michael lit up at the idea. And I can contribute on the medical side, scientific validation, safety protocols, integration with traditional treatments. And I can handle the administrative part, Patricia added. Event planning, family relations, volunteer management. Emily looked at each family member, hardly believing what she was hearing. You really want to do this? We do, Richard said without hesitation. Actually, I need to confess something, sweetheart. What is it? For a long time, I've been wanting to do something meaningful with my life. Something beyond just making money. He paused, emotional. You gave me the chance to do that, to use everything I've learned over the years for something that truly matters. Mrs. Margaret, who had been watching the conversation, spoke up again. Can I give some advice? Of course, Grandma, Emily replied. When two people who love each other come together to help others, magical things happen. I saw it many times between your grandfather and me. What kind of magical things? Patricia asked curiously. They discover that helping others is the best way to help themselves, too. The depth of her words left everyone thoughtful. Grandma, how are you still so wise even with... Emily stopped mid-sentence, realizing she was about to mention the illness. Even with Alzheimer's? Mrs. Margaret finished with a smile. Sweetheart, the disease may take a lot from me, but it can't take away 82 years of life experience. Richard held his mother's hand. Mum, I'm so sorry I didn't spend more time with you these past years. Don't be, my son. You were building your life. That's what you were supposed to do. But I could have visited more, I could have. Richard, she gently interrupted. The past can't be changed, but the future is still being written. Emily watched the exchange between her father and grandmother with a warm heart. This was exactly what she had hoped for: reconnection, forgiveness, a fresh start. So, she said, are we really doing this? Starting a company together? We are, Richard answered, but on one condition. What? You'll be the president. The company will be your creation, your vision. I'll just be the investor and advisor. Dad, I don't know if I'm ready for... Yes, you are, Michael interrupted her. Emily, you built a program from scratch, achieved impressive results and earned the trust of families and institutions. You have everything it takes to lead. Patricia agreed with her son. Sweetheart, you have a unique vision for elder care. You should be the one in charge. Emily took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility and the thrill of the opportunity. Then I accept. Let's do this together. The table erupted in applause and hugs. Even Ashley, who had stayed quiet since the earlier incident, came over to congratulate Emily. Cousin, I'm sorry for what I said before. I was being petty and jealous. It's okay, Ashley. I get that it's hard to believe in change when we've never seen positive examples. Can I maybe help in some way? I don't know anything about elder care, but I do know digital marketing. Emily smiled. Digital marketing would be perfect. We need to show the world that aging isn't the end of life. It's just a new chapter. Then count me in. Richard watched the family dynamic transform before his eyes. In just hours, the daughter he'd considered a disappointment had become the catalyst for unity and purpose in the entire family. Emily, he said, there's one last thing I need to tell you. Go ahead, Dad. I love you and I'm proud of you, prouder than I've ever been of anything in my life. The words she'd waited months to hear finally came, filled with absolute sincerity. I love you too, Dad, and I'll prove your faith in me isn't misplaced. Sweetheart, you already have. What I saw today was the clearest demonstration of competence and purpose I could ask for. Mrs. Margaret clapped slowly. How beautiful, she said. A family that loves each other always finds its way back home. The matriarch's words echoed through the room like a blessing. The dinner that had begun tense and resentful was turning into the most meaningful celebration the family had had in years. Grandma, Emily said, would you like to come home today? To our real home, not the nursing home. Richard startled. Emily, I'm not sure that's a good idea. The nursing home has specialized care. Dad, she can stay with us for a few days. We can take turns looking after her. It'll be a test to see how she adapts to a more familiar environment. Patricia loved the idea. Richard, it would be wonderful to have Mom home again. But what if she gets worse? What if something happens? Then we take her back to the nursing home, Emily replied simply. But what if she improves? What if being in a family environment speeds up her recovery? Michael considered the possibility. Medically speaking, environmental changes can influence the progress of dementia patients, especially if the new setting is rich in positive stimuli. Richard looked at his mother, who watched him expectantly. Mom, would you like to spend a few days at home? I'd love that, son. I miss my garden and my kitchen. Then it's settled, Patricia said. We'll get her room ready tonight. And I can stay on call, Emily offered, for anything she needs. Richard felt overwhelming emotion wash over him. His mother coming home, his daughter finding her calling, his family uniting around a shared purpose. It was more than he could have dreamed of at the start of the day. You know what, he said, this is the best birthday of my life. Why, Dad? Because today, I didn't just gain another year of life. I gained a life worth living. Mrs. Margaret smiled and began humming softly the song she'd played on the piano. One by one, the family members joined her, creating an imperfect yet love-filled harmony. The restaurant waiter discreetly approached Richard. "Excuse the interruption, sir, but several people have been asking about the music the lady played. Some guests would like to greet her." Richard looked around and noticed many people still watching them with touched smiles. "What if we introduce Grandma as our family's new artist?" suggested Patricia. "Artist?" Mrs. Margaret asked, confused. "Yes, Grandma. You did something really beautiful there at the piano. People loved it." "Oh, that," she said modestly. "I've always played. George used to say it was my gift." "And he was right," Emily said. "You have the gift of touching people's hearts." An elderly couple timidly approached the table. "Excuse us," the woman said. "We didn't mean to intrude, but the music you played moved us deeply. Our daughter brought us here to celebrate our 50th wedding anniversary, and that melody reminded us of our wedding day." Mrs. Margaret smiled at the couple. "How wonderful, dears. That's what music is for, to bring back beautiful memories." The elderly man bowed respectfully. "Could you tell us the name of the song? We'd love to try finding it." "It doesn't have a name," Mrs. Margaret replied. "I made it up long ago for my husband." "You composed that song?" the woman asked, amazed. "I did. It was our love song." The couple exchanged an emotional glance. Would it be too bold to ask you to play it again, for us?" Richard stood up. "Of course it's not bold. Mom, would you like to play once more?" Mrs. Margaret seemed to think for a moment, then nodded. "For a couple celebrating 50 years of love, I'd be honored." She rose again and walked to the piano, followed by the whole family, and now the elderly couple too. Other restaurant guests began gathering, forming a small audience. This time, when Mrs. Margaret began playing, her performance seemed even more confident, more connected. And when she started singing, her voice sounded clearer, stronger. As the music played, Emily watched not just her grandmother, but everyone around her. She saw tears in the eyes of the anniversary couple. She noticed restaurant staff standing still, completely absorbed by the melody. She saw other elderly guests in the audience humming along, as if they'd known the song for decades. That's when she had a revelation. Her calling wasn't just caring for the elderly individually, it was creating moments like this. Moments where age became irrelevant, where music and love overcame any physical or mental limitations. When the song ended, the impromptu audience applauded warmly. Mrs. Margaret stood by the piano, clearly surprised by the reaction, but radiant with happiness. "Thank you," she told everyone. "It's been so long since I played for so many people." The elderly couple approached again. "Ma'am, that was a gift. A wonderful gift. How can we thank you?" "No need to thank me," she replied. "Just keep loving each other. That's the best thanks there is." Richard watched the scene with a mix of pride and awe. His mother, whom he'd considered lost to Alzheimer's just hours before, was now shining like a star among strangers. "See," Emily whispered in his ear. "She was never lost. She just needed the right chance to shine again." "You're right," he admitted. "And you know what else?" "What?" "I think I just figured out what will set our business apart." "What's that?" "We won't just care for the elderly. We'll give them opportunities to shine, to show they still have so much to offer the world." Emily smiled, feeling that her father had finally fully understood her vision. "Exactly, Dad. We'll turn nursing homes into stages. We'll turn caregivers into audiences. We'll show that aging can be the most beautiful phase of life, if given the right opportunities." They returned to the table in a celebratory mood. The conversation now revolved around concrete plans for the new company, activity ideas, potential partnerships, and expansion strategies. "Emily," Michael said, "have you thought about documenting this whole process, creating a scientific protocol for your techniques?" "I've been considering it. Actually, my professor from the specialization program suggested I write a paper on the results." "A scientific paper?" Richard asked with interest. "Yes, with quantitative data on improved quality of life, reduced depressive symptoms, increased social interaction, things that can be measured and proven." "That would be incredible for validating the work," Patricia observed, "and for convincing more families to try different approaches." "And for training other professionals," Michael added. "Imagine if we could create a training course based on your methods." The conversation was interrupted by the waiter. who brought Richard's birthday cake. It was an elegant cake, with golden candles forming the number 65. "Time for the birthday song," Patricia announced. The family gathered around Richard to sing, but before they began, Mrs. Margaret made a request. "Can I suggest something?" "Of course, Grandma," Emily replied. "How about we sing for all the birthday people in the world who are alone today, for all the elderly who don't have family to celebrate with them?" The suggestion deeply moved everyone. Richard nodded, emotional. "Mom is right. Let's sing for all of them." And so they sang "Happy Birthday to You," thinking not just of Richard, but of all the forgotten elderly in nursing homes, empty houses and hospital rooms. They sang with the awareness that from that day on, they would make a difference in many of those lives. When Richard blew out the candles, he made a silent wish that in the years he had left, he could make up for all the lost time and build something truly meaningful alongside his daughter. "What did you wish for, Dad?" Emily asked. "I wished for health and wisdom to help you transform the world of the elderly into a more humane and dignified place." "That's a wish that will come true," she replied with conviction. As they cut the cake and passed out slices, the conversation continued excitedly. Plans were made, responsibilities divided, dreams shared. "Emily," Ashley said, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "How did you know you were on the right path? How were you sure it was worth leaving everything behind to follow this dream?" Emily thought for a moment before answering. "You know when you're doing something and time just flies? When you wake up excited to work? When you see results that move you?" "I do. That's it. When we find our true calling, work doesn't feel like work. It feels like purpose." Richard nodded vigorously. "That's exactly how I feel when I think about starting this company with you. For the first time in decades, I wake up excited to go to work. And I," Michael added, "am thrilled to apply medical knowledge in a more human way, to see medicine working alongside emotional care." Patricia smiled at the family. "And I'm happy to see all of you happy. There's nothing more rewarding for a mother than seeing her children fulfilled." Mrs. Margaret, who had been quietly eating her slice of cake, looked up. "Can I say something?" "Always, Grandma," Emily replied. "I've lived 82 years. I've seen a lot. Wars, changes, joys, sorrows. But you know what I've learned." "What's that?" "That life only makes sense when we live for something greater than ourselves. And today, seeing you all planning to help so many people, I feel proud to be part of this family." The matriarch's words were like a blessing over the plans taking shape. Richard held his mother's and daughter's hands at the same time. "Mom, thank you for showing me the example of strength and wisdom. Emily, thank you for teaching me it's never too late to start over. Dad," Emily said affectionately, "thank you for finally understanding that success isn't about money or status. It's about making a difference." Dinner was coming to an end, but no one wanted the moment to end. There was a sense that something important had happened, something that would change not just the family dynamics, but the course of everyone's lives. "When do we start?" Richard asked. "Tomorrow," Emily replied without hesitation. "Tomorrow I'll take you to see Grandma's nursing home. You'll see with your own eyes what we've already done and what we can still improve." "And the day after, we'll visit other nursing homes," Michael suggested, "to understand different needs and think of adaptable solutions. And next week, we'll start structuring the business plan," Patricia added. Emily looked at each family member, hardly believing the transformation that had happened in just a few hours. "You know it's going to be hard work, right? Dealing with families in delicate emotional situations, the limitations of the elderly themselves, resistance from some institutions." "We know," Richard answered, "but we also know it's worth it. And most of all, we know we won't be doing it alone. We'll do it together." The word "together" echoed around the table like a commitment. After years of missteps and misunderstandings, the Johnson family had found not just their way back to each other, but also a shared purpose that would unite them for years to come. Mrs. Margaret yawned softly. "I'm getting tired," she said. "Let's go home, Mum." Richard stood up. "We'll prepare your room and you'll sleep in your own bed tonight." "In my bed?" she asked, her eyes shining. "In your bed," Patricia confirmed. "At home, with family." As they prepared to leave, the restaurant manager approached. "Mr. Johnson, We didn't want to interrupt your dinner, but several guests asked if the lady might return to play again. Would it be possible to arrange a special performance? Richard looked at his mother, who smiled shyly. It would be my pleasure, she replied, but only if I can bring my family along. Of course, it would be an honor for the restaurant. Emily had a sudden idea. What if we made this event the official launch of our business? A musical evening with seniors as the stars. Richard was excited by the suggestion. Perfect. We could invite other talented seniors, families interested in our work, professionals in the field, and the event's proceeds could go toward expanding the project, Michael added. The manager was enthusiastic about the proposal. Ladies and gentlemen, it would be a privilege to host such an event. We can discuss the details next week. As they left the restaurant, Emily carried not just the empty box that had held the album, but also a sense of fulfillment she hadn't felt in months. Her gift had been so much more than restored photographs. It had been the restoration of an entire family. Emily, Richard said when they reached the parking lot, can I ask you something? Of course, Dad. Do you really forgive me for everything I said, for not supporting your decision, for taking so long to understand? She stopped and looked him in the eyes. Dad, there's nothing to forgive. You were protecting what you thought was best for me. She just discovered there were other ways to protect me. What do you mean? By supporting me so I could be strong enough to follow my own path. And that's exactly what you did today. Richard held her in a long embrace. I love you, my daughter. And I promise that from now on, I'll support all your dreams, even if I don't understand them right away. And I promise to include you in every one of them, she replied, because I've learned that shared dreams are so much more powerful. Mrs. Margaret, leaning on Patricia's arm, watched the interaction between father and daughter with a serene smile. George, she murmured softly, our boy has learned how to be a real father. The end of the story. So what did you think of Emily's story and her family? Could you feel the emotion of their reconciliation and the strength of shared dreams? Tell us in the comments which moment moved you the most, and if you've ever experienced a similar situation of family misunderstanding that turned into support. Your honest feedback means so much to us. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other heartwarming stories.